Troyborg is asking, you said you had a side project you wanted to work on when you get done with particle system before starting audio system rework. Are you able to talk about it? Yes, so the thing I was kind of thinking about is essentially I've been playing a lot with Gaussian Splatting recently, and I can show you, some of the videos. Let me bring some of my splats. So right now, the only way I can actually show you these is, through a video. So this is one I did very recently. So this is probably one of the best scans. You can see if I play this, I'm like, I almost asked you, like, is this loaded for you? But like, it only needs to be loaded for me. But if you look at this is a scan of a fursuit head of like a friend who's here like in Czech Republic. His name is Amju. He let me scan like his fursuit head. And I first reconstructed with the traditional technique, but then I started playing with Gaussian splat software. I threw the same data set at it, and like the result is incredible. Like if you look at the details of the fur, like the technique is capable, of capturing the, the softness of it. Like it just, like, it just looks real. Like that's the easiest way to describe it, is like it gives you incredible amount of detail while still being able to render this at like, interactive frame rates. And I really like I've been like 3D scanning for like years. Like, I love like 3D scanning stuff and making like models of things. And this technique, it offers a way to reconstruct, things. I can actually, hold on, let me also bring one more. This, I can show you how the result of this looks with traditional photogrammetry. So if I bring this, you see this is traditional mesh, and it's a pretty good result. Like I was like really happy with this. But like if you look, there's like no softness in the hair. There's like artifacts around the fur. It gets kind of like, blobbish. It's like it loses its softness that the Gaussian splats are able to preserve. This is another kind of example. I took these photos for this like in 2016. Like that's like, I think for like 8 years ago now. And it's just like, also like if you just look at the part, it just looks real. Like I'm really like impressed like with the technique. I've been like kind of having a lot of fun with it. And I've been kind of like, like on my off time, I've been kind of like, I've been essentially like looking for ways, I'm kind of like looking at how it like works. And the way the Gaussian splats like work, it's relatively simple in principle. Like it's like an extension of point cloud, where instead of like, just tiny points, each of the points can be like, a colorful blob that's like has like fuzzy edges to it. And they can have different sizes. Some of them, you can actually see some of the individual splats, some of them are like long and stretched, some of them can be round, some are small, some are big. And they can also change color based on which direction you're looking at them from. So I've been essentially looking for a way, can we integrate Gaussian splatting rendering into Resonite? And I'm fairly confident like I'll be able to do it at this point. Like I understand it like well enough to make an implementation. The only problem is, I don't really have time to actually commit to it right now because I've been focusing on finishing the particle system. But the thing I wanted to do is, after I'm done with the particle system, mix in like, a smaller project that's more personal and fun, just sort of like, like a mental health break, pretty much. It's something, just kind of do this primarily for myself, because I want to like, bring those scans in and, showcase them to people. I'm still not 100% decided. I'll kind of see how things go, but I'm kind of like, itching to do this and doing a little bits of research, like in like, like on the weekends and so on to get this going. So it's something, I like to do. I think so, also something that like a lot of people would appreciate as well, because I know there's other people in the community who were, playing with splats and they wanted to bring them in. And I think it would also make like, Resonite kind of interesting to a lot of people who might not even think about it now, because it's essentially going to give you ability to, you know, visualize the Gaussian splats in a collaborative, like, you know, sandbox environment. So it might even open up like some new doors, but I'm not 100% decided, but pretty much this is kind of what I've been kind of thinking about. Next question, Zid, just Zid. Can those splats work within the engine? They aren't meshes, right? Could they be rigged? So splats, you can have to implement the support for it yourself. The output isn't a mesh. Like, the idea of Gaussian splatting is you're essentially using a different type of primitive, you know, to represent your, you know, I was gonna I don't want to say mesh because, you know, it's not a mesh. Essentially represent your model, you know, your scene or whatever, you know, you're going to show. So instead of a triangle, you know, vertices and triangles that we have with traditional geometry, it's completely composed from Gaussians, which are a different type of primitive. You can actually use meshes to render those. From what I've looked, there's like multiple ways, you know, to do the rendering. One of the approaches for it is, like, you know, you essentially encode like the splat data, and then you just render this. You use the typical, like, you know, GPU rasterization pipeline to render them as quads, you know, and then the shader does like the sampling of like spherical harmonics for like you know, so it can change color based on the like angle you look at it from and other stuff. There's other approaches that implement the actual rasterization in compute shader, and that can like lead to like more efficient ones. And at that point, like, you know, you're not using traditional geometry, but, you know, the approaches kind of vary. There's like lots of ways to like implement them. Next question, Troyborg. So is that something you need special software to create them, or is it just something in Resonite so it knows how to render that new format for 3D scan? We essentially need like a code to, like, you know, render them. The main, like, the gist of it is, the way you approach it is you get your data set, you know, your Gaussian splat. It's essentially a bunch of like, it's essentially points with lots of extra data. You have, like, you know, the size of it, and then the color is encoded using something called Spherical harmonics. And that's essentially like a mathematical way to like efficiently encode information on the surface of a sphere, which means like you can kind of sample it based on the direction. Like, where if you consider, you know, if you consider a sphere, I should have grabbed my brush. I'm gonna grab a new one because I'm too lazy to go over there. Brushes. Let's see. I'm not gonna like go over there because it's just a simple doodle. But say you have, like, you know, this is sphere in, you know, 2D. It's a circle. And if it's like a unit sphere, then each point on the sphere is essentially a direction. So if you have information encoded, you know, on the surface of your sphere, then each point, like, if I'm, like, you know, if I'm the observer here, so this is, you know, my eye, and I'm looking at this, then the direction is essentially the point from the center of the sphere towards the observer. I use this direction to sample the function, and I get a unique color for this particle direction. If I look at it from this direction, you know, then I get this direction, and I sample the color here, and this color can be different than this color. And this is a way that the Gaussian splats, they were really good at encoding stuff like, you know, reflections, for example, because with reflection, you literally, the color on the point, like, on the point, it literally changes based on the angle you look at it from. So, and it's the spherical harmonics that actually take the bulk of the data for Gaussian splat, because from what I've seen, they use a third order spherical harmonics, which means for each point you actually have 16 colors, which is quite a lot. And a lot of the work is, like, you know, how do you compress that in a way that the GPU can decode, like, very fast on the fly, you know, so it doesn't eat all your VRAM. But yeah, essentially you write your code, you know, to answer the question more directly, you write your code, you know, to like encode it properly, and then, like, you know, render it as efficiently as you can. And you can kind of utilize, you know, some of the existing like rasterization pipeline as well to kind of save you some time. Zid is asking, I don't have a good understanding of splats, but aren't they essentially particles? So I kind of like went over this a few times. Like they're not particles in the sense of particle system. There's like some overlap because each splat is a point, but it has a lot of the additional data to it, and it's also not a tiny small particle, but like it can be like variously sized color blob. Next question: does the sprinkles? So can you make spots with any 3D scans? I don't really get them, but they're neat. So the data set I use for mine. It's essentially just photos. It's the same approach I use for traditional. Let me think. Like there's like different ways to like make them, but the most common one that I've seen is like you actually just take lots of photos. You use traditional approach. The photos get aligned in a space. And like then you sort of like estimate like the depth, like the traditional 3D reconstruction, except for the splats, it doesn't really estimate the depth. The way I've seen it done in the software I use is it starts with like a sparse point cloud that's made from the type points from the photos, essentially like points in space that are like shared between the photos, and it generates splats from those. And the way it kind of does it is, I believe it uses like gradient descent, which is a form of like machine learning, where each of the splats is actually taught how it should look so it matches your input images. So that's usually the longest part of the reconstruction process because it has to like go through a lot of like training. And if you use the software I use, it's called Gaussian post shot. It essentially like it runs like usually like several dozen thousand like training steps, and you can usually in the beginning you can kind of see like the splats are very fuzzy and it's just kind of moving around and they're sort of like settling into space and getting more detail, and it also like adds more splats in between them where it needs to add more detail. So there's like a whole kind of training process to it. I actually have a video I can show you. Because there's also like a relevant question I can see, so I'm gonna, because Shadow X is asking, does all common splatting software encode spherical harmonics? I never noticed color changes in my scans in a Scaniverse and PostShot. So I know for sure PostShot does it. I don't know about Scaniverse because I don't use that one. It's possible they simplify it because like I've seen some implementations of Gaussian splats. They just throw away the spherical harmonics and encode a single color, which saves a ton of space, but you also lose, one of the big benefits of them. But I can tell you, PostShot definitely does it, and I have a video that showcases that pretty well. So this is kind of Figment that I did for Fur, and I like reprocessed this with Gaussian splatting, and watch like the reflections on on the surface of the statue. You can see how they change based on where I'm looking from. It's kind of subtle. If I look at the top, there's actually another interesting thing, and I have another video for this. But Gaussian splatting is very useful if you have like good coverage from like all possible angles, because the way the scanning process works, they, like I mentioned earlier, they are trained to reproduce your input images as close as possible, which means for all the areas, all the area where you have photo coverage from, they look generally great. But if you like move too far away from them, like in this case, for example, from the top, I was not able to take any pictures, from the top of it. It actually kind of like they start going a bit funky. Do you see like how it's kind of like all kind of fuzzy and the color is blotchy? And that's kind of like, for one, it shows like it does encode the color based on the direction, but it also shows like one of the downsides of it, because I have another video here. So this is a scan of this is like I don't even know how long ago. This was like over 6 years ago. When like my family from Ukraine, they were like visiting over because my grandma, she was Ukrainian, and they made borscht, which is like the kind of traditional kind of like foods. And I wanted to scan it, but I literally didn't have time because they put it on disk. I was like, I'm gonna scan it, and I was only able to take 3 photos before they started moving things around. But it actually made for an interesting scan because I was like, how much can I get out of 3 photos? And in the first part, this is traditional scan with a mesh surface that's done with, with Agiso Metashape. Oh, I already switched to the other one. So you see, all the reflections, they're kind of like, baked in. It doesn't actually look like metal anymore. There's, lots of parts missing because literally they were not scanned, but the software was able to estimate the surface. It knows this is a straight surface. If I look at it from the angle, apart from the missing parts, it's still coherent. It still holds shape. With Gaussian splatting, it doesn't necessarily reconstruct the actual shape. It's just trying to look correct from angles, and you'll be able to see that in a moment. So this is the Gaussian splat, and you see it looks correct, and the moment I move it, it just disintegrates. Like, you see it's just a jumble of, colorful points, and it's because all the views that I had, they're like relatively close to each other, and for those views, it looks correct because it was trying to look correct, but because there's no cameras, from the other angles, the Gaussians are free to do, just whatever. Like, they don't have anything to constrain them, to look particle away, so it just ends up a jumble. And that's a very to me, that's very kind of interesting way to visualize the differences between the scanning techniques. But yeah, that's kind of long-winded answer to it. Yes, they do encode the spherical harmonics. And you can make it pretty much with any scans, but the quality of the scan is gonna depend, on your data set. And I'll be kind of throwing, because I have terabytes of 3D scans, I'll be just throwing everything, at the software and seeing what it ends up producing. I know there's also other ways. There's some software, also just double checking time. There's also some software that just generates it with AI and stuff, but I don't know super much about that. So there's other ways to do them, but I'm mostly familiar with the one I'm mostly familiar with using photos as the data set. So I'm gonna bring this one in. What? Once it loads. This one's from YouTube, so it's actually a little bit worse quality. But this is another Gaussian splat that I did. Well, I have lots, but I need to make videos of more. This one I found super neat because it's a pretty complex scene. This is from GSR at BLFC. You can see it captures a lot of kind of cool detail, but there's a particular part I want you to pay attention to. I'm gonna point it out in a sec, because one of the huge benefits of Gaussian splats is they're really good at not only soft and fuzzy details, but also semi-transparent stuff. So watch this thing. Do you see these kind of plastic? Well, not plastic, but these transparent bits? Do you see these? Look at that. It's actually able to represent that really well, which is something you really don't get with the traditional mesh-based photogrammetry. And that's actually one of the things if you wanted to represent it as a mesh, you'd kind of lose that. And that's why why Gaussians are really good at representing scenes that traditional photogrammetry is not. And I found it really neat. And we have also lots of splats I done. This October I was visiting in the US, and I went to the Yellowstone National Park again. I have lots of scans from there. And all of them kind of have some, because there's a lot of geysers and everything, and there's actually there's steam coming out of the geysers, and there's water, so it's reflective in some places. And I found with Gaussian splats that actually reconstructs pretty well. It even captures some of the steam in the air, and it gives it more of a volume. So they're a really cool way of representing those scenes, and I just kind of want to be able to bring that in and be publish those on Resonite and be you want to come see bits of Yellowstone, bits of this and that, just go to this world and you can just view it and show it to people. But yeah.